Hi guys, HyDra again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. The Call of Duty World Championship hosted by OpTic in Dallas, Texas is just around the corner. The big questions raised: what happened to the Esports World Cup shortly after in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia? Big debate has been had on which teams are actually going to attend, which of the 12 CDL teams have been invited, if not all of them, and of those 12, which will actually go to the tournament. OpTic Gaming were not selected as one of the official partner teams. We still thought, however, they were potentially invited as OpTic Texas. Hex gives his thoughts on the matter and says yes, if OpTic are invited, they will be going. Does this mean they haven't been? Does this mean they have and they're just keeping it under wraps for now? Do the players want to go and attend and try and play for this $1.8 million prize pool? Very much intrigued your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. Some beautiful pictures here actually from Methods from Scump's wedding over the weekend. This is, it's just got to be the Amalfi Coast, hasn't it? That's just absolutely spectacular. Crimsix also, I believe, is racing at Watkins Glen this weekend. It's interesting for Kremp, right? Just to talk a little bit about what he's up to actually. So here he is, competing in this Porsche North American Sprint Series and all this. Now, it's not the greatest level of competition in the world. People are going to call it a plumbers league or whatever, because a lot of the guys racing in this are basically rich guys that have the money to finance something like this, because it takes so much money to race in general. So these guys, a lot of the guys that he's racing get to pump it in like, at least tens, if not like hundreds of thousands of dollars just to compete in this series for basically a bit of fun. So Kremp's competing against some actual proper racing drivers and some of those guys in these, races that he's doing. But obviously Kremp wants to go to the next level, right? He wants to get, spotted and move up to a more competitive series and eventually get to Le Mans and win Le Mans, like he's talked about that in the last couple of weeks. So he kind of has to dominate a championship like this to at least get spotted by whatever his next venture might be, rather than doing this championship again, because I think he's getting funded by the Rafa Racing Club and the relationship that he has over there, of course racing for Porsche. So anyway, Kremp had a bit of a rough time yesterday. He caused an incident, made it all the way back up to P2 in the end, then he got a penalty. So I guess today we'll see if he does better and doesn't. Well, here he is anyway, looking good, and he's obviously in really good shape now, so it's great to see that Kremp's making some serious progress. But yeah, we'll see, because I think Kremp is probably going to win this championship over the course of the races that they've done. But I think Kremp needs to definitely make a statement this season. I think he has to some degree if he wants to go to the next level. And just still rooting for Kremp's next adventure, because of all the players that have retired in any esports, this is some of the coolest stuff I've ever seen. And this just really sums up Crimsix as a player and a personality, and now of course as a racing driver full time. A couple of things to mention though before we get into the OpTic stuff on exactly what's going on with the Hex quarters, because they're moving back there. This is Dashy, by the way, absolutely zapping Snoopy across the map. I mean, that was some nice hit reg, and that was some 0 bullets missed there from Dashy. I do wonder as well, what would Dashy think about this whole accuracy thing if this is actually true? We haven't heard, as a recording, any further update on this, but yesterday we saw some leaks that accuracy was in a chat with OpTic, talking with the boys during presumably a set of scrims. So whether he's working with Kenny, whether he's working with Prez, guys that he knows well and has developed into good players in the past and got Pred actually looking comfortable on his role in the SMG side, there's a few things that I think accuracy can bring to the table. Could it get to the point of being too many cooks in the kitchen? I suppose it's possible, right? To have, accuracy and Karma and JP all in there, and of course Kenny as a vocal player as well from a leadership side. Could it get too much? Maybe, but I think that it's probably a good way to go here right now. I don't know that there was people putting stuff like this together. It is funny, I think, in a way, how a lot of people were roasting accuracy so hard this season, right? He's not playing well enough, his guy's got to retire and all this, and then he gets spotted in one group chat with OpTic, and all of a sudden it's oh wow, accuracy, what a great leader, be great coach and all this. But I do think this is quite nice to see, really. And I'm not really sure that Zuma was brought up by accuracy in the same way. I think really Crowder was Zuma's codfather, if you want to look at it in that way. But because I think technically Zuma was a pro and basically became a pro at the same time that accuracy was, within reason, really. But these other names also apply. Obviously, Sib, Pred, and Kenny. Pretty cool that they use some of the older pictures of the guys, or TG Strike doesn't have the newer pictures when they've grown up and stuff. And accuracy still looks the same on both. But I wonder if OpTic will say anything on this shortly as well. And what they may well have to say something on is exactly what is going on in the Esports World Cup situation. Because, of course, like, they're trying to win the World Championship. Dashy had a talk about which of the majors that he's won was the most impressive. But, of course, what he really wants to do is actually win at the big one, the World Championship. Certainly because it's put on by OpTic. It's an OpTic-hosted World Championship for the first time ever, really. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like, right? Because obviously there's been some speculation over, because they're hosting champs, is it going to be OpTic banners everywhere, right? Is Hitch going to come out with the drums? Like, are they going to do it like the OpTic majors, or is it going to be a neutral environment? I think they basically said, look, we're going to make it neutral, but we're kind of, you know, just running the operations behind the show, because the CDL had to outsource it, I guess, to someone, because they don't have the internal resources to do this type of stuff anymore, because, well, basically they fired everyone. So they've got to find someone to do it, and of course OpTic were willing to step up to the plate. So in some sense, it's the event that OpTic were meant to win. It's obviously in home territory as well, and maybe the geolocation in COD doesn't last forever, but you know what I'm getting at. So that's what they're really trying to do, but obviously not long after that, they are potentially going to be going to the Esports World Cup. Interesting that Dashy is always talking about, you know, getting to the diner that they used to attend an awful lot nearby the Hex quarters, which of course they're now back at. And I did think it was interesting, right? Like, there were lots of guys in the replies here. I know you're always going to see this, certainly with OpTic, but like, Dashy can't get away from it, can he? Because this guy says, you know, get practicing instead. And, you know, when we get in the first stream, and then if you look at the further replies, you'll say, focus on champs. And, you know, how it goes. Maybe it's not a surprise, but, you know, Dashy can't get away with anything at the moment. You can't even go for dinner without, you know, people complaining that he isn't practicing enough. Speaking of champs, thought this is kind of interesting that Crowder is going to play or coach now at his 11th, I guess, World Championship this year. He came 7th, 6th, then 1st as a player. 2017 weren't the best after he took some time out in 2016. Then he returned as a coach from 2019 and beyond. Came 3rd on FaZe in 2018, of course, famously on that team that Zuma things. Could have maybe won that event had they just won at that losers finals. And since then, it's been 2nd, 2nd, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, of course, all while coaching FaZe. So there's always a debate on how valuable Crowder is, because obviously his results as a coach are good, at least in terms of average placing. But, you know, the event victories, obviously, at the end of the day, it's more on the players than it is on the coach, but always there is something to be said on that. But let's talk about the World Cup, right? Because we saw earlier today, Biffle, Hisoka, Shifty, they took down the $200,000 prize or whatever it was for 1st place at the EWC Warzone tournament, and the Call of Duty stuff is coming up in the relatively near future. There's still, as a recording, however, no confirmation as to what's actually going on at the Esports World Cup. Who's going to go, which of the CDL teams are actually invited, and what the plan is going to be. Because as JKL points out this clip from the OpTic podcast a couple of days ago, that, well, Hex seemingly wanted to say more on this, but all he says is, if we're invited, we're going to go. So I'll share the clip, and then we'll discuss what it might actually mean.
Yep. Champs coming up, and then we got the Saudi event. Are we going to that?
To Saudi?
Yeah.
If we're invited, then yes, of course we're going.
All right. So then we got those two. And
I
then
am curious though. Look, my ego was about to fucking open its fucking mouth. You go. Keep going.
And then it's off-season time. So
there were rumours now a few weeks ago, middle of June, that according to the Esports Advocate, multiple sources confirmed that all 12 CDL teams are invited to the World Cup. Whether those teams will go is unconfirmed. So Hex is saying that, look, if they're invited, they're going to go. But what are they invited as? Are they invited as OpTic Texas? Are they invited as OpTic Gaming? Because Toronto Ultra are invited as Toronto, but also as part of like KOI. Ravens are invited, and they're going to go as the Carolina Royal Ravens, we're pretty sure. They may end up like, you know, partnering with another team, playing under a different brand. I guess these things are kind of possible, and we'll see what they do. Boston may be in a similar boat, but, you know, I presume they're going to go as the Boston Breach, at least in Boston's case, if they go to attend, and we're pretty sure that all the teams have been invited. But the issue is, I guess for OpTic, that they weren't invited to the foundation, right, or as part of the 30 teams that were invited to attend, and you can see the 30 teams right here. So I think that maybe is what he's getting at there, Hex, when he says like, oh, you know, my ego was going to say something, but I decided not to in the end, because I'm sure that Hex feels like, given the status of OpTic as an organisation, the massive fan base they have, if teams like, you know, FaZe are going to be there and some of these other teams, then OpTic should have been invited as well, like straight up invited to compete everywhere at the tournament. I think the issue was for the guys coming up with these decisions is that OpTic nowadays are not the strength in depth organization they used to be. They don't have any other teams really apart from Halo, which still exists but is not on a great upward trend, and then effectively COD, right? You know, it's COD personalities. So, you know, I think that's probably the reason why they weren't invited at the end of the day. But nonetheless, I'm sure Hex feels like, now, if some of these orgs are invited, I probably should have been, and OpTic probably should have been, and therefore, what does he think about potentially attending in the first place? Then again, though, if the team has been invited as OpTic Texas just to play in the Call of Duty stuff, then I imagine they would probably want to go. So, you know, there's obviously some speculation on what Hex actually meant about this. Was he going to say something like, how does the most popular org in COD not be one of the first orgs to get an invite, or get an invite at all? And, look, he may well be on the money to some degree, but at the same time, it's not a COD-only tournament, and potentially the COD team has got the invite. So my read on this personally is that they have been invited as OpTic Texas. They are going to go, but Hex just didn't really want to talk about it yet, because assuming that they're going to do some sort of announcement for it, is Hex just going to say, oh yeah, we're going on a podcast? Or if they're going to like announce it in a tweet or do some sort of content around it, I don't know, then maybe he didn't want to say that. That's kind of my read on it, just because we're pretty sure that OpTic Techs have been invited, and Hex may say, damn, you guys didn't invite me as OpTic Gaming, like kind of disrespectful, screw you guys, not going to go type thing. And I thought maybe that could happen, but now Hex is saying, look, if we get invited, we're going to go. And also, I'm sure the players want to go, right? Because when there's this type of money on the line, the players are going to want to go and attend, and they're going to be saying, Hex, like, no, let's just accept the offer, like, let's just go to ReeaL and play the tournament. But yeah, I guess we'll see how things go. But Scump's getting involved to some degree. He's going to be streaming it when the Modern Warfare 3 tournament happens. So that's on Scump's side, but also, you know, in many ways, these esports organizations operate as not exactly agents precisely, but, you know, management teams to some degree. So if Scump is involved, then people involved with OpTic are also involved in getting this type of discussion and deal over the line, at which point probably there's going to be, you know, some involvement, I would say, here from OpTic. But intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below on that one. Just one final thing I thought was interesting here from Brian Stats. He was talking about basically 4 organizations have dominated the league from start to finish. It's either been FaZe, OpTic Ultra, or New York that have won basically every single event, and that's now more apparent than ever in this particular season. Now, these orgs, they spend the most money. Now, okay, Boston also spend a lot of money, but they don't have the results. But it is true that these guys, they have the best players, they spend the most money in general, and, you know, next season is probably going to be a similar story. How easy is it? Okay, Thieves have done it in the past. They've won a world championship, right? They're up there. But they didn't have the money to spend this season, and therefore they couldn't build the competitive team that they arguably wanted to build. At what point does a salary cap need to be introduced to avoid the super teams and avoid the trend of all the superstar talent funneling to the top 4? I think it's very difficult really to get into that spot, because even if they did a salary cap, and they used to do one a couple of years ago before they realized that it wasn't really legal to do so in California because they didn't have a counterparty, and therefore the salary cap wasn't really legal to actually operate, and also there was, you know, just like a luxury tax anyway. The thing is, the players are always going to want to play with the best players, and most of the organizations are just kind of poor right now, so they're not going to be able to attract the big names. So I don't know how this is going to change. What I hope is that we go from 4 to like 5, you know, like if Thieves can spend a bit more money and get back in there. I also don't think there's a massive problem with having a top-heavy league, as long as those teams are, you know, nice and competitive with each other and are fighting for tournament wins, which is exactly what we've seen this season. 1 win for each 4 of these teams. So I don't really think it's that bad. It's nice to be get another team in the mix, but the reality is that every sport is going to look like this to some degree. But very much interested to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.